I died for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. In those moments, I witnessed the regret of fallen Christians and the indescribable joy of the faithful. Jesus showed me visions that shook me to my core. My name is Sophia Green, and this is the story of how a near-fatal asthma attack became a divine wake-up call. What I learned in those brief moments between life and death could change your perspective on faith forever. Rain pelted against the windows of my cozy apartment, creating a soothing rhythm that masked the quiet ticking of my bedside clock. It was just another dreary March afternoon in 2021, and I had settled into my usual routine of working from home. Little did I know that this ordinary day would soon become a pivotal moment in my life. As I sat at my desk, typing away on my laptop, I felt an all-too-familiar tightness creep into my chest. At first, I dismissed it as nothing more than a mild flare-up of my asthma, a condition I'd managed since childhood. But within minutes, the discomfort grew into a persistent ache that demanded my attention. My breath quickened, each inhale becoming more labored than the last. A sense of unease washed over me as I reached for my inhaler, my fingers trembling slightly as I brought it to my lips. One puff, then two. But the relief I desperately sought didn't come. The tightness in my chest intensified, transforming into a vice-like grip that seemed to constrict with each passing second. Panic began to set in as I realized this wasn't a typical asthma attack. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage as if trying to break free. I stumbled to my feet, my legs feeling like lead weights as I tried to make my way to the phone. The room began to spin, the familiar contours of my apartment blurring into a hazy, indistinct landscape. My vision swam, dark spots dancing at the edges of my sight. I gasped for air, each breath a Herculean effort that yielded little reward. The realization hit me with terrifying clarity. I was losing consciousness. My legs buckled beneath me, no longer able to support my weight. As I sank to the floor, a strange calm washed over me, contrasting sharply with the chaos of my failing body. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into an eternity. I could hear my own ragged breathing, growing fainter with each exhale. The world around me began to fade, colors bleeding into a murky gray. In those final moments of consciousness, a flood of thoughts and emotions coursed through me. Fear, regret, and a desperate plea for more time mingled together in a whirlwind of sensation. I thought of my family, my friends, all the things left unsaid and undone. As darkness crept in from the edges of my vision, I felt an overwhelming sense of finality. Then, just as the last vestiges of consciousness slipped away, something unexpected happened. As the world faded to black, I felt a strange, inexplicable pull. It wasn't physical, not in the way I'd ever experienced before. It was as if my very essence was being drawn towards something, or somewhere, beyond the veil of darkness that had enveloped me. In that moment, suspended between life and death, I realized that my journey was far from over. As darkness enveloped me, I felt a strange pull, tugging me towards an experience that would forever change my understanding of faith, life, and the very nature of existence itself. As the darkness receded, I found myself enveloped in a realm of soft, warm light. The gentle radiance seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once, casting no shadows and revealing no discernible source. My mind reeled, struggling to make sense of this ethereal environment that defied all logic and reason. Disorientation washed over me in waves as I tried to ground myself in this unfamiliar space. The solid floor of my apartment had vanished, replaced by an intangible surface that felt both substantial and weightless beneath my feet. I reached out, expecting to touch familiar objects, but my hands grasped only wisps of luminescent air. As my senses slowly adjusted, a startling realization dawned on me. I was no longer confined to my physical body. The crushing weight in my chest had disappeared, replaced by an inexplicable lightness. I felt myself expand beyond the boundaries of flesh and bone, my consciousness stretching out into this mysterious realm. A conflicting storm of emotions surged through me. Fear gripped my heart as I grappled with the unknown, my mind racing to comprehend this impossible situation. Yet, simultaneously, an otherworldly peace settled over me like a warm blanket, soothing my turbulent thoughts. This dichotomy of sensations left me breathless, caught between terror and tranquility. As I struggled to make sense of my surroundings, a presence materialized before me. My breath caught in my throat as I found myself face to face with Jesus. His features were both familiar and transcendent, radiating a love and compassion beyond human understanding. But what struck me most were his eyes, deep pools of sorrow that seemed to hold the weight of the world. Jesus gazed at me with an intensity that pierced my very soul. His voice, gentle yet resonant with divine authority, broke the silence. "Sophia," he said, my name carrying a weight I had never before experienced. "I need you to see this." The anticipation building within me was almost palpable. What could be so important that Jesus himself would appear to show me? My mind raced with possibilities, each more extraordinary than the last. The air around us seemed to thicken with expectation, charged with an energy that made my skin tingle. Slowly, Jesus raised his hand, and the world around us began to shift. The formless light coalesced into shapes and colors, taking on definition and substance. I watched in awe as entire scenes materialized before my eyes, as vivid and real as life itself. These were no mere images or memories, but living, breathing visions of a reality I had never before witnessed. My heart pounded as I realized I was about to be shown something of profound importance. Whatever these visions contained, I knew they would forever change my understanding of faith, life, and the very nature of existence. As the first scene solidified before me, I steeled myself for what was to come, knowing that what I was about to witness would shake me to my very core. The first vision materialized before me, a tapestry of light and shadow that seemed to pulse with its own life force. I leaned forward, my entire being focused on absorbing every detail of what Jesus was about to reveal. The scene before me shifted, transforming into everyday moments. I saw a young woman rushing out the door, her Bible left unopened on the coffee table. Jesus' voice, gentle but sad, echoed in my mind. "These are the ones who have slowly drifted away, Sophia. Watch closely." The vision changed to a middle-aged man staring at his computer screen. His eyes were fixed on shameful images. A small voice told him to look away, but he clicked on, guilt and resignation clear on his face. My heart ached as I saw his inner struggle. Another scene showed a busy father, juggling work and his kids' activities. Every day he meant to pray and reflect, but every night he fell into bed exhausted. This went on for weeks until even thinking about quiet time with God made him feel guilty and not good enough. Watching these scenes, I felt uneasy. The small compromises, ignored convictions, and fading faith felt familiar. I saw myself in these moments, choosing comfort over conviction, staying silent instead of speaking truth, being busy instead of close to God. The visions blurred together, showing missed chances and broken promises. I saw believers becoming more like the world, their light getting dim. The weight of these choices felt heavy on my chest. Finally, I saw where this spiritual drift led. A woman stood before God, her life exposed. She cried as she realized how far she'd strayed and how much time she'd wasted. Memories of ignoring God's nudges and choosing worldly things over spiritual growth hit her hard. Her once joyful spirit now seemed empty, weighed down by her choices. I saw clearly how dangerous it is to become spiritually lazy. It wasn't big falls or obvious rebellion that was the biggest threat, but the slow drift away from God. All those small compromises and ignored promptings added up to a life that never really knew God's deep love and purpose. My heart hurt from what I'd seen. The regretful woman's face stuck in my mind, warning me about the path I was on. But I felt Jesus wasn't done yet. There was more to see and understand. Nervous but curious, I got ready for what would come next. As the haunting visions of spiritual complacency faded, the scene around me changed. The gloomy atmosphere lifted, replaced by a bright radiance. Jesus pointed to this new scene, his eyes warm and kind. I saw a group of people, each glowing with intense joy. Their faces, though different, all shared a bright inner light. Jesus said softly, "These, Sophia, are the ones who stayed faithful through every challenge." Their stories unfolded before me. A young woman prayed in a basement during a bombing, her faith a light in the darkness. An old man, sick and in pain, encouraged his family and praised God with every breath. A teenager stood firm in his beliefs despite being bullied at school. I was amazed by their strength. They faced hardships that would break most people, but their faith grew stronger. They had a peace that went beyond their troubles, like they had a direct line to an endless source of joy. I realized I was seeing their deep connection with God, a bond so strong it changed who they were. Their faith wasn't just helping them survive, it made them thrive in ways that didn't make sense. They lived with purpose, spreading love to everyone around them. I started crying as I understood what I was seeing. This was real, lived-out faith, not perfect, but totally committed to God. They had a joy I'd never seen before, even when things were tough. As I took all this in, Jesus looked at me deeply. The air felt heavy, like he was about to tell me something really important. Jesus' eyes locked with mine, their intensity burning through to my very soul. The air around us seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. I knew, in that moment, that what he was about to say would change everything. His voice, gentle yet filled with urgency, broke the silence. "Sophia," he began, my name carrying a weight I had never before experienced. "I have shown you these visions for a reason. You have witnessed the sorrow of those who have fallen away and the joy of the faithful few. Now, I have a message for you to carry." The gravity of his words settled over me like a heavy mantle. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the enormity of what he was asking. Me, Sophia Green, an ordinary woman who had nearly lost her life to an asthma attack, chosen as a messenger for the divine? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Jesus continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "Tell them, Sophia. Tell them that my arms are always open. No matter how far they have strayed, no matter how long they have been away, I am waiting to welcome them back." His words echoed in my mind, reverberating with a power that shook me to my core. I felt my heart racing, torn between the honor of being entrusted with such a crucial message and the overwhelming fear of the responsibility it entailed. Who was I to be given such a task? How could I possibly convey the depth of what I had witnessed, the urgency of his call? As if sensing my inner turmoil, Jesus' expression softened. "Do not be afraid, Sophia. I have chosen you for this purpose. Your experience, your struggles, your very humanity, these are the tools you will use to reach others." I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. But Jesus wasn't finished. His next words carried a note of urgency that sent a chill down my spine. "But they must return to me before it's too late. Time is short, Sophia. The world is changing, and souls are at stake. They must hear this message now, while there is still time to turn back." The weight of his words pressed down on me, the urgency in his voice igniting a fire within my soul. I saw again the faces of those who had fallen away, the regret and sorrow etched into their features, and I remembered the radiant joy of the faithful, their unwavering trust in the face of adversity. In that moment, I knew I couldn't refuse this call, no matter how daunting it seemed. Taking a deep breath, I met Jesus' gaze and nodded, accepting the mission he had laid before me. A smile of infinite tenderness spread across his face, filling me with a warmth that chased away my lingering doubts. As the vision began to fade, the ethereal landscape dissolving around us, I clung to Jesus' words, imprinting them on my heart. I knew that when I returned to the world of the living, nothing would ever be the same. I had been given a message of hope and warning, and I was determined to share it with everyone who would listen. As Jesus' words faded, a bright light appeared beside him, taking the shape of a tall figure radiating power and grace. Gabriel, the archangel, stood before me, both awe-inspiring and terrifying. His piercing blue eyes seemed to look right into my soul. I couldn't breathe for a moment, stunned by the angel's presence. When Gabriel spoke, his voice sent shivers through my whole body.
"Sophia," he said, "your journey is just beginning. There's so much more to learn about faith and the human spirit."
Gabriel's words captivated me. He talked about how free will and divine guidance work together, and about spiritual battles fought over every soul. It was a world more complex than I'd ever imagined.
"People often think faith is just about believing," Gabriel said, sounding both impressed and sad. "But it's a living force that shapes reality. Every choice, every doubt, every belief affects the world in ways you can't see."
I listened, amazed, as Gabriel told stories of regular people whose faith changed history. He talked about whispered prayers moving mountains and small beliefs growing into huge movements. With each story, I understood faith better. But as I listened, I started to worry. How could I, just a normal person, share these big truths with others? Gabriel must have sensed my worry. His face softened.
"Don't be afraid, Sophia," he said gently but firmly. "You were chosen for this, and you won't be alone. I'm here to help you."
I was shocked. "You'll help me?" I asked, hardly believing it. Gabriel nodded, smiling a little.
"I'll be your guide, protector, and friend. When you're lost or overwhelmed, call me. I'll be there to help and support you."
I felt relieved and newly determined. Knowing I'd have an angel helping me gave me courage I didn't know I had. I stood up straighter and looked Gabriel in the eye.
"Together," Gabriel said, "we'll wake people up, bring back their faith, and give hope to those who've lost it. It won't be easy, but remember, your message can change lives and save souls."
As Gabriel spread his wings wide, I felt a rush of energy. The big task ahead didn't seem impossible anymore. With Jesus' message in my heart and an archangel by my side, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. The ethereal realm around me began to fade, its edges blurring like running watercolors. I felt a gentle tug, as if an invisible thread connected to my very essence was being pulled. The sensation grew stronger, and I realized I was being drawn back to my physical body. Reluctance washed over me. How could I leave this place of divine revelation? The weight of the message I carried pressed heavily on my heart, and fear gripped me. What if I forgot the details of this encounter? What if Jesus' urgent words faded like a dream upon waking? As the celestial light dimmed, I tried desperately to cement every moment, every word, and every emotion into my memory. I clung to the image of Jesus' sorrowful eyes, Gabriel's reassuring presence, and the stark contrast between the fallen and the faithful. "Please," I whispered, "don't let me forget." The journey back to my body was disorienting. I felt as though I were falling through layers of consciousness, each bringing me closer to the physical world. The weightlessness of my spiritual form gave way to a heaviness that was all too familiar. My lungs felt constricted and raw. Pain, absent in my divine encounter, began to creep in. My chest ached, and my throat felt scratchy. The sharp scent of disinfectant replaced the heavenly fragrance. I struggled against these sensations, desperately trying to hold on to the peace I had experienced. As I reconnected with my body, fragments of the earthly world filtered through. I heard a heart monitor beeping and the muffled voices of medical staff. Someone rustled fabric near my bed, a jarring contrast to the serene silence of the spiritual realm. I fought to open my heavy eyelids. The urgency of my mission pushed me forward. With effort, I managed to crack them open. The harsh hospital lights made me squint and blink. As my vision cleared, I saw the medical equipment surrounding me. A nurse rushed over. "She's awake!" the nurse exclaimed, her voice tinged with surprise and relief. I tried to speak, to share the vital message burning within me, but my throat was too dry. Frustration welled up as I realized how difficult it would be to convey what I had witnessed. Yet, even with these doubts, I felt profoundly changed. I had been marked by the divine in a way that could never be ignored. As I took my first conscious breath, I knew my life would never be the same. The message I carried was too important to forget. With determination in my heart, I embraced my return to the world, ready to begin my new purpose. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the hospital room as I lay in bed, my mind reeling from the profound experience I'd just had. The stark contrast between the ethereal realm I'd visited and this stark, fluorescent-lit reality was almost too much to process. Even the ceiling tiles seemed to swirl above me as I clung to the memory of what I'd witnessed. My body felt like lead, and each breath reminded me just how close I'd come to death. The pain in my chest was grounding, an anchor tethering me to the present as my thoughts spiraled. I closed my eyes, desperate to hold on to the vivid images of Jesus and Gabriel. What if they faded away? What if I forgot the message they'd given me? The room suddenly erupted into chaos. Doctors and nurses flooded in, their voices blending into a haze of medical jargon. "Miraculous recovery," I heard someone say. I kept my eyes closed, unsure how to explain what had really happened. Not long after, my family arrived. My mom was at my side in an instant, gripping my hand so tightly I thought she'd never let go. Tears streamed down her face as she thanked God over and over. My dad stood at the foot of the bed, his tough exterior cracking as he tried to hold back tears. I wanted to tell them everything, every glowing detail, every word of the message, but the words just wouldn't come. The following days passed in a blur, but inside, a storm was raging. Jesus' urgent message played over and over in my mind, refusing to be silenced. But fear held me back. What if no one believed me? What if they thought I was crazy? Each night, the faces from my visions visited me in dreams. They didn't fade. They grew sharper, clearer, more insistent. I couldn't ignore them. I realized I didn't have a choice. The truth wasn't just a memory, it was a mission. One quiet afternoon, I made up my mind. I couldn't keep this to myself, no matter the cost. I called for the nurse and asked to see my family. As I waited, my heart raced, but I forced myself to take deep, calming breaths. When my parents walked in, their faces a mix of worry and curiosity, I felt a surge of courage. This was my moment. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to tell you something. Something happened while I was gone." Their expressions shifted as I spoke, from confusion to wonder, and finally to something like belief. For the first time, I felt the weight of the message lift just a little. A few days later, as I stepped out of the hospital, the crisp air felt like a second chance. A new purpose filled me, its weight heavy but not unwelcome. My journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. Whatever came next, I knew I was ready. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman I hardly recognized. My dark skin glowed, my tight curls framed a face full of purpose. The shy, quiet woman who'd collapsed weeks ago was gone. In her place stood someone new, eyes burning with divine insight. I leaned in closer, studying the changes since my brush with death. The worry lines that once spelled stress now hinted at wisdom beyond my years. My once slouched posture now radiated quiet strength. Staring at myself, I couldn't help but think about my old life. Mundane routines had turned into meaningful moments. Brewing coffee in the morning wasn't just a chore anymore. It was a sacred ritual. Each sip reminded me how precious life is. Even my commute had become something sacred. I noticed everything. The way light and shadow danced across buildings, the fleeting emotions in strangers' eyes, the intricate designs of nature that I used to ignore. Each detail felt like a part of something greater, a masterpiece painted by a divine hand. But this newfound awareness came with its own burden. Everywhere I looked, I saw spiritual battles unfolding. An argument at work wasn't just a disagreement, it was pride clashing with resentment. A homeless person's plea wasn't just a request for help, it was a glaring reminder of how much we fail each other as a society. These realizations weighed on me, yet they also fueled me. My role as an unlikely prophet felt overwhelming, almost impossible. But then I'd think of Jesus' steady gaze, Gabriel's comforting presence. Their trust in me silenced my doubts. Day by day, I grew bolder. My voice became steadier as I began sharing pieces of my experience. People noticed. Coworkers commented on my newfound confidence. Friends were amazed at my insights. Even strangers seemed drawn to this sense of purpose I carried. Standing before the mirror now, I took a deep breath and straightened up. The woman staring back at me wasn't just Sophia Green, the asthmatic office worker. She was Sophia Green, bringer of hope, bearer of divine truth. The weight of that role was immense, but it was also empowering. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone. The first step of my journey was in front of me. The message I'd been given needed to be shared. As my thumb hovered over the screen, I felt a surge of courage. This was my calling, and I was ready to embrace it. With shaky hands, I posted about my near-death experience on social media. As responses came in, my stomach churned. Friends were worried and supportive, but how could I truly explain what I'd seen in a simple post? I decided to start small, sharing my story with my best friend Sarah over coffee. Her eyes got big as I described my visions. When I mentioned Jesus and Gabriel, she looked doubtful and suggested it might have been a hallucination. That hurt, but I kept trying to explain how important this was. Over the next few weeks, I talked to anyone who would listen about what I'd experienced. People reacted in all sorts of ways. Some brushed me off, others were really interested, and my family's responses ranged from tears to eye-rolling. It was exhausting and left me unsure of myself. I started to have doubts. Was this message real, or had I made it all up? One night, as I lay in bed worrying, I felt Gabriel nearby, silently encouraging me. It gave me new strength to keep going. Everything changed when I was volunteering at a soup kitchen. I saw an old woman sitting alone, looking hopeless. As we talked, I felt I should tell her about seeing Jesus welcoming back people who had strayed. She started crying and held my hands, saying she'd felt lost and forgotten by God. Seeing hope come back to her eyes, I suddenly understood why I'd been chosen. Not to convince everyone, but to help people who really needed it. I felt more sure of what I was doing with each person I reached. As more people heard about my story, I faced new challenges, but now I was ready for them, knowing that even helping one person made it all worth it. I was just starting to share this important message, and I felt nervous but excited about what would happen next. As weeks passed, I started noticing small but meaningful changes in the people around me. My usually cynical coworker began asking real questions about faith. My neighbor, who'd struggled with addiction, seemed more at peace. His eyes were clearer, and his smile felt genuine. These changes gave me hope, but they also made me nervous. I knew spiritual growth took time and care, like a seed slowly growing. At the same time, a sense of urgency stirred within me. I kept remembering Jesus' words about how our time is limited. One Sunday, the church was packed. I saw faces I hadn't seen in years. Mrs. Thompson, back after her husband's death, sitting with her granddaughter. Mark, a former alcoholic, praying quietly with a peaceful look on his face. After the service, Sarah, my skeptical friend, came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I don't know if I believe everything you've said," she whispered, "but something's different. I feel like there's more to life than I thought. Is that weird?" I hugged her, overwhelmed by her honesty. These moments made all the hard work feel worthwhile. But even as I celebrated these wins, I couldn't ignore the challenges people still faced. I noticed how some struggled to keep their new faith alive. A recovering addict ran into an old friend who tempted them. A newly religious couple hit rough patches. It dawned on me that my role wasn't just about spreading the message. I had to help people navigate their spiritual journeys too. One night, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few months, I had a big realization. Every small victory mattered. Every person finding hope or turning back to God was a win. I thought about the parable of the shepherd who celebrates finding just one lost sheep. Feeling inspired, I grabbed my phone and started writing to my supporters. I shared stories of the changes I'd seen, careful not to name names. When I hit send, I felt a deep gratitude for being part of something so important. As more lives changed around me, I couldn't help but wonder what amazing things might happen next. How many more people could find hope? How many more could find their way back to faith? Thinking about it, I closed my eyes and said a quiet thank you, ready for whatever came next in this mission. The soft glow of the evening sun filtered through the curtains of my small living room, casting shadows across the worn carpet. I sat in my favorite armchair, Margaret's letter trembling in my hands. My mind spun as I tried to grasp the weight of her words. Excitement and overwhelm mingled, filling my chest. How could my message have reached so far? Closing my eyes, I whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. But before I could even finish, a strange warmth filled the room. A light, brighter and purer than anything I'd ever seen, poured in from nowhere. My eyes flew open, and there he was, Gabriel, the archangel, standing in my living room. I couldn't breathe. My heart raced as his piercing blue eyes locked onto mine. Then he smiled, a soft, reassuring smile that seemed to calm every fear I didn't know I had.
"Peace be with you, Sophia," he said, his voice resonating with a power that filled every corner of the room.
Before I could gather myself to respond, the world around me began to shift. My living room dissolved like sand blowing in the wind, replaced by vivid, breathtaking visions. I saw people my words had touched. There was a man who'd conquered addiction. Now, he was helping others find their way. A couple knelt together, their bond stronger than ever as they prayed side by side. A teenager stood confidently before a crowd, guiding others with the hope that had once eluded her. Tears streamed down my face as the visions faded, leaving me back in my armchair. My hands trembled, my voice caught in my throat. What could I say? How could I even begin to comprehend the beauty of what I'd just witnessed? Gabriel's voice broke the silence, soft but commanding.
"Do you see now how much your faith has done?"
I nodded, unable to speak. Humility and awe crashed over me in waves. I felt so small, yet somehow more significant than I'd ever imagined.
"You are not alone,"
Gabriel continued, his eyes filled with kindness.
"I know this feels like a heavy burden, but God is with you every step of the way."
As he spoke, the air seemed to hum with a power that both frightened and comforted me. His next words etched themselves into my soul.
"Keep going. Your work isn't done, but everything you do matters forever."
And then, just like that, he began to fade. His presence lingered, though, as his final words wrapped around me like a warm embrace.
"Be strong and brave. God is with you wherever you go."
I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. Then, something shifted within me. The doubts I'd been holding on to for so long melted away, replaced by a deep, unshakable purpose. Strength coursed through me, lifting me to my feet. Gabriel was gone, but his message was clear. I knew what I had to do. The road ahead would be anything but easy, but I wasn't afraid anymore. God was with me, and with that knowledge, I felt ready to face anything. I would keep going. I would keep spreading hope and faith in a world that so desperately needed it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my backyard, I felt the weight of my journey settle upon my shoulders. The evening breeze carried whispers of countless souls still searching for meaning, for hope, for a way back home. My heart ached with the knowledge that every passing moment was an opportunity, perhaps the last, for someone to turn back to God. I closed my eyes, and the faces of those I had encountered over the past months flashed before me. Some had listened with open hearts, their eyes brimming with a longing for truth. Others had turned away, their doubts etched deeply into their expressions. There was a time when my voice would have faltered in moments like these, but now it carried quiet confidence.
God's arms are always open, I whispered into the growing darkness. The words felt as if they resonated beyond me, a truth far greater than anything I could claim as my own.
The first stars began to emerge, tiny beacons in the vast night sky, as if they were watching over me. My resolve deepened under their watchful gaze. I knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people to reach, new hearts to touch. But my message would remain the same. Don't wait to find the love and hope that's waiting for you. Your journey to God starts now. Time is short.